All right.
Woo, he's big.
Oh, nice fish. Good job.
That's a big one.
Howdy folks, Cal Kellogg here. It is once again time to talk river salmon fishing. River salmon fishing is really starting to heat up. They are catching salmon in the Feather River. They are catching salmon in the Sacramento River. Before long, they're going to be catching salmon right here in the capital city, and you want to get in on all that action. So today, we are going to be talking about one of the most effective and certainly the most iconic salmon lure for California anglers, the tried and true flatfish. Man, put a sardine wrap on that, maybe add a little crawfish meat, a little white prawn meat, and you are a long way towards having a nice salmon dinner or a big old salmon in your smoker. But let's talk a little bit about how this versatile plug can be fished. Basically fish them 3 different ways depending on the situation, and catch salmon on them all the way from, you know, the Delta all the way up to the Red Bluff area and beyond. So let's start off talking about standard trolling. I got that wrapped around my rod here. And before we talk about the plugs and how to fish them, we need to talk about the rig. Now, I've got this rod balanced with a standard Penn level wind reel spooled up with 65-pound test braid. That's pretty standard. A dedicated salmon trolling reel probably needs to have a line counter, but it's not absolutely essential. This is the same rod I use for fishing, you know, bait for Delta stripers. I use it for halibut fishing in the bay, and it will totally work for salmon fishing in the Delta and in the upper rivers, despite the fact that it does not have a clicker on it. Now, I've got that reel mounted on top of one of my striper halibut salmon rods. It's pretty typical of what you want in a salmon rod, whether you're back bouncing or trolling. It's got a nice long butt. It's a trigger stick. It is an 8-foot long rod, but it has a sensitive tip. And that's important because you want to be able to feel the sinker, feel the lure, and you also want to be able to see the lure working at times when you're fishing the rod out of a rod holder. So you want a fast action rod, sensitive tip, plenty of backbone. You want that long butt section so you can get a hold of it. You can really balance that on your arm. You've got some leverage to fight that fish because, you know, salmon, you know, they're 20 plus pounds, a lot of them. That's a big hard fighting fish, and you need a rod that can handle a fish of that size. So I'm tangled up again. Story of my life. These rods are available in my online store. I think they retail for 90 bucks. That's a lot of rod for 90 bucks. It is a 2-piece rod, so it's easy to transport. You know, you can get it in your car, you can stash it in the boat. But when you're out on the water, that 8-foot rod is nice to have, but to and from, 2-piece rod is awesome. So here's how we rig up. We come down, we bring the braid straight down, and it doesn't matter. Any one of the 3 techniques I'm going to discuss will run the same leader. It's just a simple 3-way leader. The braid comes down to a 3-way swivel, Palomar knot there. I've got about a 12-inch dropper there of 25-pound test mono. That's just an improved clinch knot. And it ends with a snap, not a snap swivel, just a snap. That's where we're going to put our sinker. And off of this eye, we've got P-Line CXX copolymer moss green 25-pound test. We got about, I don't know, I would say 48 inches of that. That comes down to a high quality lock snap, and that is where the plug attaches. Palomar knot here, Palomar knot up there where this joins the 3-way Palomar knot. They test it, you know, above 90% of the line strength, and we want all the power we can get when we hook up a big salmon in current. So let's talk about the 3 different techniques. Before we do though, let me slap a sinker on here. In this case, I got it here somewhere. Got it in my pocket. Of course, it's a sinker, so it sinks to the very bottom. What I have here is I believe that is a 5-ounce cannonball. You can use a torpedo, you can use a cannonball. Cannonballs work well for back bouncing, so I'm just going to put a cannonball on here. So technique number 1, we're going to talk about a straight troll. We're down in the Delta. We're going to wrap the plug with the sardine. Got the sinker on there. So we're going to go ahead, put the plug in the current, we're gonna, whoa, come here you. We're gonna put the plug in the current, we're gonna free spool the reel, and we're not just gonna drop it all the way down. We're gonna feather the reel until we feel that sinker hit the bottom, okay? Once we're down on the bottom, we're gonna take a couple cranks on that reel, probably 1.5 cranks, and get the sinker just a hair off the bottom. Now we're gonna troll at a slow speed. We're gonna gauge our trolling speed based on the wiggle in the rod tip. So we're gonna see how that plug's working, and when we got a good wiggle going on, we know the plug's working, we know we're going the right speed. Now there's always some discussion. Should you troll up current or down current? And there's pluses and minuses. Going up current, you can go slower, but the plug's gonna be coming up on the fish from behind. Not a supernatural presentation. If we go with the current, plug's gonna be coming at the fish's face, but we're gonna have to go faster because we've got to go faster than the current to make the plug work. My preferred method when I'm just doing a straight troll out in the delta is to kind of S-turn my way upriver. That way I could go slow, but the plug is always coming at the fish from an angle, and I just think that's more effective, it's more natural, it's less apt to spook the fish, but it's still going to come up, it's going to annoy them, and hopefully they're going to grab it and you're going to have a fish on the end of your line. That's a straight troll. That will work in the delta, that will work up in the capital city, it will work anywhere you have fairly placid, fairly deep water. Just a slow troll, that's going to work for you. We'll talk a little bit about the hook set in a second. That's technique number one. Technique number two, they like to do this up like Mouth of the American in places where you have a lot of flow. Go out there, you anchor your boat. Now we're in an anchored boat. You leave the plug out the same way. You just lower it down to the bottom, but guess what? There's enough current, you don't have to troll. When your sinker hits the bottom, give yourself a crank on the reel, put the rod in the holder, and you'll see the plug working in the current. There's enough current that the plug can just sit there and work and work and work. And you're just waiting for a big old salmon to come up river, get that plug in his face, grab it, fish on, potentially. We'll talk about the hook set on that technique too. The final technique, now if you don't have a jet boat, you're probably going to be out with a guide doing this, and that is back trolling or back bouncing a plug. Super effective. This is how you're going to fish up in, above Corning, Red Bluff, all the way up to Redding. Back bouncing, big flatfish. This is a T50 flatfish here. You might be using a T55 or a mega giant T60 late in the season when the really big fish are in the river. What you're going to do, you're going to line up in an area where there are believed to be salmon holding. The guide, he's going to use the kicker motor to allow the boat to go backward down the river, slower than the current moving around the boat, but you're still going downstream. You're not going upstream against the current. He's just using the motor to allow the boat to back downstream slower than the current surrounding the boat. He's going to tell you, put your lure in the water. You're going to free spool it down, controlling it with your thumb until you feel the sinker hit. Then you're going to engage the reel. And this is important. If you just sit there, or if you put the rod in a holder, that sinker is going to find a spot in the rocks, and very soon you're going to overrun your sinker and you're going to be snagged. It's going to be a mess, and everybody on the boat is going to not like you very much. But what you're going to do is, as the guide eases the boat downriver, you're going to lift and set the sinker down. Lift and set it down. You're going to feel it hit the bottom each time. Lift, set it down. Lift, set it down, and you're going to keep doing that rhythm. You might have to let out a little more line. You might have to shorten up a little depending on the current flow and the depth of the water. The guide is going to be telling you, shorten up, let out more line. You just remember, lift, set it down. Focus on that. Lift, set it down. You're using sensitive gear. You've got braided line. You've got a good size sinker on there. Lift, set it down. Now, let's talk about the hit. In all three situations, the salmon's going to come up and they're going to grab that plug, and if you're holding the rod when that strike occurs, or if you're looking at it in the rod holder, every cell in your body is going to scream, set the hook. Don't do that. If you set the hook immediately, you are almost certainly either going to miss the fish or you're going to hook them really lightly and you may lose them during the fight. Instead, You want, if you're in the holder or if you're holding it, you want to see that salmon just mauling that bait. You just want to see him just trying to kill it. And it's going to pull harder and harder, and the rod's going to get more and more bent. And you fight that desire to set the hook until the last possible second. And when you set it, I want you to thumb that spool. I want you to set that hook hard and immediately start reeling. You know, don't be this guy. Set the hook and look at the rod tip. Guess what? You just hooked a big, fast 25-pound salmon. He feels the resistance. What's he going to do? Swim right at the boat. If you're looking at the rod tip and not reeling, slack's going to form. He's going to head shake. Remember, he's got this ginormous plug in his mouth. There's a lot of leverage there. He could throw that plug. So when you set, be confident you're going to hook the fish and get on that reel. Reel, 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 reel. If you missed them, you missed them. There's no benefit to leaving it in the water. But if you hooked him, you got to get that slack out of the line. Then the guide's going to take control, or you're going to take control if you're with other guys. They need to clear their lines. You need to get ready to fight the fish. These are big, hard-fighting fish. The fish is probably going to go around the boat, potentially. You keep yourself parallel to that fish. If he goes over here, follow him. If he goes over here, follow him. Don't be in this corner of the boat over here fighting a fish over there. He's going to run into the motor and you're going to lose him. So follow your fish. Keep the tip elevated, and none of these heroics, you know, lifting and lowering the rod, none of that stuff, none of this, you know, this Roland Martin, I'm really cool stuff. Keep the rod tip up, grind on the fish, keep the rod loaded against the fish, and that's how you're going to land a bunch of salmon. Final point, if you're out in your own boat, think this through, make sure you have a big enough net to land a 30-pound salmon. I hear this horror story all the time. I've talked about it on the channel. Well, I went out in the river and I hooked this big giant salmon, but I got it up and I couldn't get it in my striper net. Yeah, a 30-pound salmon, they're 39, 40 inches long. They're 14, 15, 16 inches wide if you get a big trophy salmon. So make sure you've got a big giant net. The last thing you want to do is work hard, get a big fish like that up to the boat and lose them because you don't have a big enough net. Anyway, enough of that. If you go into the FHS store, I have these rods available for 90 bucks. I also have kits of salmon lures and striper tackle. You get a T50 flatfish, a couple of Bob Toman spinners, the best spinners you can buy, a couple of my hand-tied striper leaders, and a deep running P-line Predator. You could bundle that stuff all up with the rod. You could buy that by itself, whatever. Wes will put up the links. I don't know how that stuff works, but it is a smoking deal. You will be all set up for salmon and striper fishing this fall. Go check out the Fish Hunt Shoot store. Check out all my gear. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I hope these tips help you land some big old beautiful salmon this fall on a flatfish or whatever you choose to fish, whether it's a flatfish or a Bob Toman spinner or whatever. But anyhow, I'll see you out on the river. Until then, I'm going to jump off. I want to thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. Without you guys, there wouldn't be a Fish Hunt Shoot YouTube channel. And if you haven't subscribed, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. I'll catch you next time right here on YouTube, and you guys have a wonderful day. This is Cal Kellogg, and I'm signing off. It's Sunday, man. I got chores to do. All my neighbors are out here working with power equipment. This guy's driving nails. This guy's cutting metal. I'm glad that's not me. I just got some light stuff to do. Anyway, you guys have a great day, and I'll catch you real soon.